Stop. Stop what you're doing right now. Stop pretending everything is fine. Stop believing the headlines. Stop trusting the financial media that gets paid by the same institutions that just robbed you in broad daylight. Because what I'm about to show you is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is not some angry guy on the internet making wild accusations without evidence. This is proof. Documented, time-stamped, verifiable proof that the $50 silver crash you witnessed was not a natural market event. It was not profit-taking. It was not a bubble popping. It was not supply and demand finding equilibrium like some suit on CNBC wants you to believe. This was a calculated, coordinated precision strike designed to destroy the most explosive rally in silver's modern history. And I'm going to show you exactly who did it, exactly how they did it, and exactly why they did it. Before we go any further, this is finance currency. This is where we tear apart the financial lies that mainstream media feeds you for breakfast. If you want truth that nobody else will give you, if you want analysis that actually makes sense of this rigged game, subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell. And drop a comment below, even just FC, so I know you're locked in, and so the algorithm knows this content matters. Now let me take you back to January 27th, 2026, a date that should live in financial infamy. That morning, silver touched $117.73 per ounce. Let that sink in. $117.73 for a single ounce of silver. This was the highest price silver had ever traded in recorded human history, not adjusted for inflation, not in some obscure foreign market. The highest actual price ever printed on the COMEX, the primary exchange for precious metals in the United States. The previous all-time high from 1980 was shattered. The psychological barriers that analysts said would take years to break through were demolished in a matter of days. Silver was up over 40% in January alone. The momentum was unstoppable. Or so we thought. Stackers around the world were celebrating. The people who had been accumulating physical silver for years, who had been mocked and called conspiracy theorists, who had been told they were fighting against progress and modernity, they were finally vindicated. The bulls were winning, the shorts were bleeding, the squeeze was on. And then, in less than 4 hours, it was over. By early afternoon, silver had plummeted to $103.89, a drop of $13.84 per ounce, a collapse of 11.76% in a single session. For those holding leveraged positions, this wasn't just painful. This was total annihilation. Accounts were blown up. Margin calls went unanswered. Fortunes built over years were erased in minutes. But here's what the mainstream media didn't tell you. Here's what CNBC conveniently forgot to mention between their pharmaceutical commercials and banking sponsor messages. This crash didn't happen because silver suddenly became less valuable. It didn't happen because industrial demand evaporated. It didn't happen because investors collectively decided precious metals were a bad investment. This crash happened because someone decided it needed to happen. And I don't say that lightly. I've spent the last 72 hours going through every piece of data I could find. I've analyzed the COMEX trading records. I've examined the margin requirement changes. I've traced the timing of announcements. I've cross-referenced the commitment of traders' reports. I've spoken to dealers in 3 different countries about physical premiums, and what I found made my blood boil. This wasn't market forces at work. This was market forces being overridden. This was manipulation at a scale that would make Bernie Madoff blush. And the evidence is so clear, so obvious, so well documented that the only reason you haven't seen it is because nobody in mainstream financial media has the courage to show it to you. They're all bought. They're all compromised. They all depend on access to the same institutions that orchestrated this attack. But I don't need their access. I don't need their approval. I just need you to keep watching. Because over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the exact sequence of events that led to this crash. I'm going to show you the weapon they used. I'm going to name the institutions involved. I'm going to explain why they did it. And I'm going to tell you exactly what this means for anyone holding silver right now. If you think you understand what happened, you don't. If you think this was just volatility, you're wrong. If you think the market is fair and free, you're about to get a brutal education. The silver crash of January 27th, 2026 was not an accident. It was an attack. And I found the proof. Let's begin. To understand how they killed the rally, you need to understand the weapon they used. Because this wasn't done with selling pressure, this wasn't done with negative news, this wasn't done with a sudden discovery of a massive silver deposit somewhere. This was done with a single rule change, a rule change that most people have never heard of, a rule change that sounds boring and technical, a rule change that the exchange can implement whenever they want, with almost no notice, and with devastating effect. It's called a margin hike. And on January 27th, 2026, the CME Group, which owns and operates the COMEX, deployed this weapon with surgical precision. Let me explain exactly how this works, because once you understand the mechanics, you'll never look at the futures market the same way again. When you trade silver futures on the COMEX, you're not buying physical silver. You're buying a contract, a promise to deliver or receive silver at a future date. And because it's a contract, you don't have to pay the full value up front. Instead, you put down a fraction of the total value as collateral. This is called margin. Think of it like a deposit on a house. You don't pay $500,000 cash. You put down $50,000 and finance the rest. Margin works the same way. One silver futures contract controls 5,000 ounces of silver. At $107 per ounce, that's $585,000 worth of silver. But before the crash, you only needed about $22,000 in margin to control that entire position. That's leverage. That's how traders amplify their bets. That's what makes the futures market liquid and active. But here's the trap. The exchange, the CME group, has the power to change those margin requirements whenever they want. There's no vote, there's no warning, there's no democratic process. They simply announce new margin requirements, and every single trader holding a position must immediately comply. And on January 27, 2026, the CME Group announced a 47% increase in silver futures margin requirements. They raised the maintenance margin from $22,000 per contract to $32,500 per contract, 47% overnight. Without warning. Let me put this in perspective so you understand the devastation. If you're a hedge fund holding 500 contracts, that's an additional $25 million you have to wire to the exchange immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, immediately. If you're a small trading firm holding 100 contracts, that's an extra $1.05 million you need to produce within hours. If you're a retail trader who scraped together everything you had to hold 10 contracts, that's $105,000 you don't have. So what happens? You sell. You're forced to sell. Not because your thesis changed. Not because you think silver is going down. Not because you made a bad decision. You sell because the exchange changed the rules in the middle of the game and you physically do not have the money to keep playing. This is called forced liquidation. And when thousands of traders are simultaneously forced to liquidate their long positions, what happens to the price? It collapses. Supply overwhelms demand. The order book gets destroyed. Prices cascade down as stop losses trigger, creating more selling, creating more margin calls, creating more forced liquidation. It becomes a waterfall, a self-reinforcing spiral of destruction, and it's all triggered by one announcement from one exchange. This is the kill switch. This is how you stop a rally without firing a single bullet, without making a single trade that could be traced back to you, without doing anything that technically qualifies as market manipulation under the law. You just make it too expensive for anyone to hold their position. And the timing of this margin hike tells you everything you need to know about intent. Silver had just broken through $110 for the first time in history. The momentum was accelerating. Every technical indicator was bullish. The shorts were getting destroyed. Open interest was exploding as new money poured in. The physical market was screaming shortage. Lease rates, which measure how expensive it is to borrow silver, had spiked to over 8%. For context, normal lease rates are 0.3% to 0.5%. When lease rates hit 8%, it means the market is desperately short of physical metal. Everything pointed to silver going higher. And that's exactly when the CME stepped in. That's exactly when they raised margins by 47%. That's exactly when they pulled the kill switch. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences. Not when the same exchange has done the exact same thing before. Not when the timing is this perfect. Not when the beneficiaries are this obvious. The margin hike wasn't about protecting investors from volatility. The margin hike was about protecting the banks that were short. It was about stopping a rally that threatened to expose the entire paper pricing system as the fraud that it is. And this wasn't the first time they've used this weapon. Let me show you the pattern. What happened on January 27th, 2026 was not new. It was not innovative. It was not unprecedented. It was a playbook that has been used for decades. A playbook that is so well documented, so thoroughly exposed that the people running it don't even bother hiding it anymore, because they know nobody will hold them accountable. Let me take you through history. Silver is surging. The Hunt brothers, Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt, are accumulating massive positions in silver futures and physical metal. The price rises from $6 to $49 per ounce in less than a year. The shorts are getting decimated. The banks are panicking. What did the exchange do? The COMEX changed the rules. They implemented what they called liquidation only trading. That means you could only sell silver futures. You couldn't buy. They literally banned new long positions. Think about that. They made it illegal to bet that silver would go up. The result? Silver crashed from $49 to $11 in 2 months. The Hunt brothers were wiped out. The rally was dead. Now let's move to 2011. Silver is surging again. It rises from $17 to $49 per ounce. It's threatening to break the 1980 high. Momentum is building. The shorts are bleeding. Physical demand is exploding. What did the CME do? They raised margin requirements 5 times in 8 days. 5 times in 8 days. Each hike forced more liquidation. Each liquidation created more selling pressure. Each round of selling triggered more margin calls. The result? Silver crashed from $49 to $26 in a matter of weeks. The rally was destroyed, again. And now, 2026. Silver breaks all-time highs. It touches 117. Momentum is unstoppable. The shorts are hemorrhaging money. Physical premiums are exploding globally. What did the CME do? They raised margins by 47%. Same pattern, same timing, same result. This is not coincidence. This is policy. This is how the system is designed to work. The exchange exists to protect the banks. The margin requirements are calibrated to kill rallies before they threaten the shorts. The rules are written to ensure that paper always wins. But let's talk about who the shorts actually are, because this isn't some abstract group of faceless traders. Let me give you a name. J.P. Morgan, the largest bank in the United States, the most powerful financial institution on Wall Street, the company that has its fingers in every corner of the global financial system. J.P. Morgan has been at the center of the silver manipulation story for over a decade. In 2020, J.P. Morgan paid a $920 million fine for manipulating precious metals markets. $920 million. This wasn't a settlement where they denied wrongdoing. This was a guilty plea. This was an admission that their traders engaged in spoofing, a practice where you place fake orders to manipulate prices. The Department of Justice called it a pattern of criminal conduct that spanned years. They admitted to defrauding the market. They admitted to rigging prices. And what happened after they paid the fine? Nothing. They went right back to trading. They went right back to holding massive positions in silver. They went right back to being one of the primary players on the COMEX. According to the Commitment of Traders reports, as of late 2025, commercial banks were net short 212 million ounces of silver. 212 million ounces. At $100 per ounce, that's a $21.2 billion short position. And here's the math that should make you furious. When silver went from $80 to $117, that's a $37 move. $37 multiplied by 212 million ounces equals $7.84 billion in paper losses for the shorts. Nearly $8 billion. That's what was at stake when silver hit 117. That's why the margin hike happened. That's why the rally had to be killed. Because if silver had continued to $130, $150, $200, the losses would have become existential. Banks would have faced margin calls of their own. The entire paper pricing system would have started to crack. So they pulled the kill switch. They used the weapon they've used before, and they crushed the rally to buy themselves more time. J.P. Morgan wasn't just involved in this crash. J.P. Morgan was the reason for this crash. They had the motive, they had the means, they had the history, and they had the market position that required silver to go down. When you see a $15 crash in 4 hours, you're not seeing market forces. You're seeing a bank protecting its balance sheet. You're seeing an institution that has already admitted to manipulation doing exactly what it's always done, and the exchange helped them do it. This is the proof. This is why the $15 silver crash was not an accident. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. Because while the paper price was getting slaughtered on the COMEX, something completely different was happening in the physical market. And this divergence, this growing gap between what the screen says and what people are actually paying for real metal, is the most important story in silver right now. It's a story the mainstream media refuses to cover. It's a story that exposes the paper market for what it really is, a fiction. Let me give you some numbers that should shock you. On January 27, 2026, while the COMEX was showing silver at $103.89 after the crash, physical silver in certain parts of the world was trading at completely different prices. In Japan, physical silver was changing hands at $130 per ounce. In Kuwait, premiums pushed prices to $146. In South Korea, dealers were quoting $97, but with multi-week delivery delays because there was no inventory. Even in the United States, premiums on physical coins and bars have exploded. If you want to buy a silver eagle from a dealer right now, you're paying $25 to $35 over the spot price. $35 premium on a coin that should theoretically track the spot price. What does this tell you? It tells you that the paper price and the physical price have divorced. They're no longer connected to each other. They're operating in two completely different realities. The paper market says silver is worth 103s. The physical market says silver is worth 130, 140, or whatever price you're willing to pay to actually get metal in your hand. This is what I call the Great Divorce. And it's happening because of one simple reason. There's not enough physical silver to meet demand at these paper prices. Let me explain the mechanics. The paper market can print infinite contracts. There's no limit to how many synthetic ounces they can create with a computer. You want to sell 10 million ounces of silver you don't have? No problem. Just create a contract. But the physical market cannot do this. Physical silver has to be mined from the ground. It has to be refined to 99.9% purity. It has to be fabricated into bars and coins. It has to be shipped, stored, and delivered. Every step takes time, energy, and real resources. And right now, the physical market is screaming shortage. COMEX registered inventories, which is the silver that's actually available for immediate delivery, have collapsed. In 2020, there were over 150 million ounces of registered silver in COMEX vaults. Today, that number is below 40 million. That's a decline of over 70%. and it's accelerating. In the first 2 weeks of January 2026 alone, 33.45 million ounces were physically withdrawn from COMEX for delivery. That's 26% of remaining registered inventory in a single week. When you see that kind of drain, when you see physical metal leaving the system at that pace, it's a sign that people no longer trust paper promises. They want the real thing. And when everyone wants the real thing at the same time, the system breaks. But wait, it gets better. On January 1st, 2026, China implemented one of the most aggressive export control policies in modern commodity history. They reclassified silver as a strategic dual-use metal. What does that mean? It means China now treats silver the same way they treat rare earth elements and critical defense materials. You cannot export silver from China without explicit government approval, and only 44 companies have been granted licenses to export silver over the next 2 years. 44 companies. For a country that processes over half of the world's silver supply, China is the middleman. They take ore from mines in South America, refine it, and ship finished silver to the West. When China restricts exports, they're restricting global supply. The effect was immediate. In Shanghai, physical silver premiums over the London spot price have reached $8 per ounce. That's the widest spread on record. Chinese buyers are panic buying physical metal because they know that once these export restrictions fully kick in, silver is going to become impossible to get. And here's the geopolitical angle that should terrify the West. Silver is embedded in everything. It's in solar panels. Every solar cell uses silver paste for conductivity. It's in electric vehicles. Batteries, contacts, and electronics all require silver. It's in semiconductors. The AI revolution runs on chips that need silver. It's in military equipment. Missiles, satellites, and defense systems all contain silver components. When China controls the flow of silver, they control the flow of technology. They control the supply chains that the entire Western economy depends on. This is not just a market story. This is a strategic story. This is a story about who controls the resources that will define the 21st century. And while all of this is happening, while physical supply is tightening, while China is hoarding, while demand is exploding, the paper market keeps the price suppressed with margin hikes and forced liquidation. They can manipulate the screen. They cannot manipulate the atoms. Physical silver is real. Paper silver is a promise. And promises break. That's what the $15 crash taught us. That's the proof that the system is failing. Let's talk about the casualties, because when you raise margins by 47% overnight, when you crash the price by $15 in 4 hours, someone has to pay. And the people who paid were not the banks. The people who paid were traders who believed the rally was real and bet accordingly. The most devastating example comes from India. In the city of Rajkot, which is a major hub for silver trading in India, 44 silver trading firms officially declared insolvency in the wake of the margin hikes and price crash. 44 firms, with combined liabilities of $425 million. These weren't amateur speculators gambling their life savings. These were established trading houses that had operated for years. But they made one fatal mistake. They held paper positions instead of physical metal. They were leveraged. They were exposed. And when the CME pulled the kill switch, they couldn't meet the margin calls. They were liquidated. Their businesses were destroyed. Their employees were unemployed. Their families were devastated. And here's the cruel irony. While these Indian firms were going bankrupt, the price of physical silver in India was hitting all-time highs. On the multi-commodity exchange of India, silver touched Rs2 59,692 per kilogram on January 27th. The physical market was soaring. The paper traders were dying. They had the right thesis. They just had the wrong instrument. This is the lesson. This is what the $15 crash teaches everyone watching finance currency right now. Paper is a trap. Paper is a promise from institutions that have already admitted to manipulation. Paper is a game where the house can change the rules whenever they want. Physical is truth. Physical cannot be margin hiked. Physical cannot be force liquidated. Physical cannot be printed, rehypothecated, or seized by an exchange rule change. So where do we go from here? I see 3 possible scenarios for silver in the coming months. Scenario 1, the system resets higher. In this scenario, the paper market admits defeat. The COMEX, seeing that physical demand is overwhelming and inventories are drained, allows the price to rise to a level that reflects physical reality. That means silver at $150, $200, maybe higher. The shorts cover, the premiums normalize, the paper and physical prices converge. This is the bullish case. But for this to happen, the banks have to stop fighting. Based on January 27th, they're not ready to give up yet. Scenario 2. The divorce becomes permanent. In this scenario, the paper price and the physical price never reconnect. The COMEX continues to trade synthetic silver at suppressed prices, but nobody cares because the physical market has moved on. Dealers price based on physical supply and demand. Industrial buyers source directly from refiners. The paper market becomes irrelevant, a casino disconnected from reality. This is actually what I think is most likely. We're already seeing it. When Japan trades physical at $130 while COMEX shows $103, the divorce has already begun. Scenario 3. Force majeure and system collapse. This is the nightmare scenario for the paper market. Demand for physical delivery overwhelms available supply. The COMEX cannot fulfill delivery obligations. They declare force majeure. Contracts that should result in physical silver are settled in cash instead. When this happens, the entire pricing mechanism breaks. If the exchange that sets the price can't deliver the metal, what credibility does that price have? None. The paper price becomes meaningless. The physical price becomes the only price that matters. This almost happened in March 2020 with gold. The system came within days of breaking. They avoided it with emergency measures. For silver, the next time might be the last time. Now, here's what you need to do with this information. If you're holding physical silver, do not panic sell. What you saw on January 27th was a paper attack. Not a fundamental change in silver's value. The physical market is tighter than ever. Industrial demand is stronger than ever. China is hoarding. Supply is constrained. If you sell because of a margin hike, you're letting the manipulators win. Don't. If you're thinking about buying, buy physical. Not ETFs, not pool accounts, not futures contracts, physical metal in your possession. Because if you buy paper, you're exposing yourself to the same risk that wiped out 44 firms in India. Manage your timing expectations. The end game could be months away. It could be years. The shorts are desperate. They will use every tool they have, but they're fighting against physics. They can't create silver. Time is on your side. Verify everything I've told you. Look at the COMEX inventory data. Look at the margin announcement dates. Look at the commitment of traders reports. The data is public. The proof is there. Share this information. Subscribe to Finance Currency. Hit the like button. Share this video with everyone who holds silver or is thinking about it. Because the mainstream media will not tell you this story. They'll say it was volatility. They'll say it was profit taking. They'll say, move along, nothing to see here. But now you know the truth. The $15 silver crash was not an accident. It was an attack. The proof is in the margin hikes. The proof is in the historical pattern. The proof is in the bank positions. The proof is in the physical premiums. The proof is in the casualties. And now that you have the proof, you have a choice. You can pretend the market is fair and keep playing their game. Or you can recognize the manipulation, stack physical metal, and prepare for the day when the paper system finally collapses. That day is coming. The manipulators showed their hand. They're desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Hold your metal, ignore the noise, understand the game. This is Finance Currency. We give you the truth that nobody else will. Subscribe, share, and I'll see you in the next one. The attack happened. Now you know why. Now you know what to do.